Good afternoon, Tim. Thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit about IHEA's Decarbonization Summit coming up next month. How you doing?
Thanks, Ann. I am doing well. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you as well. It won't be Monday when everybody sees this, but that's okay. If you don't mind, I'd like to go through some questions about decarbonization and sustainability. And it seems like the push to decarbonization was very strong last year, and it seems to slow down a bit in the United States. Why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, good question. And we're seeing this within my thermal solutions business as well. And I think there's many factors that are that are leading to this. So first, the current administration, the Trump administration, is not really too keen on sustainability. In fact, the big beautiful bill had actually struck out a lot of the sustainability initiatives that the Biden administration had been pushing previously. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. The other thing that we have seen is there there are operational expense issues as well. So while some of the sustainability initiatives involve nothing more, by the way, one of the biggest things you can do is just try to burn, you know, example, natural gas more efficiently. That both saves on your carbon footprint and also saves money. This is running into a little bit of headwind due to the operating expense of anything other than natural gas. As an example, if you're planning on moving over to electric, chances are that you're going to run into several times the cost to run electric that you currently have on natural gas. Especially true for the United States, where gas remains very stable price wise and also inexpensive price wise. And these businesses like that. They like to know what their costs are going to be to operate. So those two factors are kind of weighing into what is, by the way, still a longer term trend. And certainly globally, we're still seeing a big push towards sustainability.
So, since you mentioned globally, what do you see happening in Europe and Asia right now?
So Europe especially is way ahead of the United States in this sustainable initiative. Now, different factors play into that. This kind of started with the Russian gas supply, concern that Putin may shut it off. So the readily available natural gas supply caused some concerns a few years ago, which pushed countries to say, okay, we're going to need to develop alternate resources, alternatives for coming up with our energy, which put them on a different path than, say, the United States. Gas was more expensive and tied to somebody who they didn't trust necessarily to keep the spigot on, so to speak. So that and governments are pushing more and more in Europe towards sustainability, and they're helping fund the sustainability. That's also where we're seeing more regulation come into play around carbon footprint and reducing carbon.
Okay. So, what about Asia? What are you seeing there?
It depends on where in Asia. We're seeing a little bit with Greater China, at least from what my business is seeing. Rest of Asia, not really, and India, not really. But certainly in Greater China, we're seeing more push for sustainability. Obviously, the Chinese government is a big influence on that. So while it is not yet as mature as sustainability is in Europe. It is certainly at a advanced state compared to what we currently see in the United States.
So what are your thoughts on why you think if you think it's still important for American manufacturers to continue efforts to decarbonize?
We looked into this, and globally, there's 5,000 companies that have pledged carbon neutrality by 2050 or sooner. And so many of these companies, regardless of where they're headquartered, 5,000 companies, that's tens of thousands of manufacturing sites all over the world. And again, they've pledged carbon neutrality, some as early as 2035. In fact, many will start having to be carbon neutral by 2035 or go back on their pledge. And then again, a lot of others, 5,000 by 2050. So it's going to happen. I look at it analogous to maybe like the stock market returns, where if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint from A to B, it's not going to be linear. It's going to be a journey, and it will be lumpy. The current administration in the United States is not going to be there forever. So where does this go in the future? And again, the future is lower carbon footprint. Absolutely, it is going to happen. So our philosophy and our push is start now, right? Now what we're trying to do is to make sure that companies understand there is a path towards carbon neutrality that is not as expensive as other paths are. Going from what you do today to zero in a short period of time is going to be very expensive. But putting things in place, running more efficiently, trying to look at waste heat recovery, those don't necessarily have to break the operating expense budget to get there. So I think part of it is just getting everybody to understand that carbon reduction is a path, and it's a long-term play. And then getting them to realize that, hey, there are things that they can do as a company and as a business to be more sustainable, again, that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, that could potentially put them in a bad market position. One of the things we've heard of is companies that have said, we're going to slow down our drive, U.S. companies, that we're going to slow down our push towards carbon neutrality because the cost is going to be to the point where we're going to have to pass it on to the consumer. And they're worried that if their competitor isn't doing it and doesn't pass that cost on because they're not incurring the cost, they're going to delay being carbon neutral. Then the concern is they're going to lose market share if they're carbon neutral. And while I certainly wouldn't argue against that, many consumers today are willing to pay a little bit more to be green. We've found that out within Honeywell in our own market studies. However, how much they're willing to pay to be green is yet to be determined, and there certainly is a factor. If it's a little bit more, a few percent more to buy something green, again, most consumers will probably do that. If it is a much more expensive than that, the alternative is 20, 30% less, then chances are they're not going to vote with their pocketbook. They're going to go for the least expensive alternative. And again, that's why our approach has been, we have to get there. We're going to get there. A lot of them, again, have carbon neutral pledges, and they have shareholders who are now going to hold them to those carbon neutral pledges, and they have factories all over the world. So I certainly think that the U.S. companies are going to get involved in that. A couple other drivers that we're seeing as well. is the companies that are still going ahead with sustainability, even in the United States, they're now going to their suppliers and they're asking their suppliers what their carbon footprint is, because they're going to start favoring suppliers who are also on a sustainability initiative. So that will necessitate and drive further lower carbon footprints.
So Tim, how important do you think it is for companies to still send their staff to something like the IKEA Decarbonization Summit this year? Things have slowed down, but there's a lot still going on. What would you say to those companies if they're still considering whether they should send staff to this event?
Yeah, I think they're making a mistake if they don't send people to this event. It's a good way to catch up on the latest, what other companies are doing, what are cost-effective ways to reduce their carbon footprint. They should be attending those to, again, find out what other companies are doing, find out where legislation is going, find out where things like hydrogen, there's hydrogen hubs being built in the United States. There's new hydrogen technologies, hydrogen manufacturing technologies coming out all the time. So as everything is moving towards, hey, how can we, number one, how can we reduce our carbon footprint and do it cost effectively? If these companies don't keep up with that, they're gonna get left behind. And like I said, at some point in time, they're going to be now behind the eight ball, and then they're going to have to race to try to catch up, which is going to be more costly. So my recommendation to them would be absolutely send someone to to this decarb summit. It's a great way, a cost-effective way to catch up on everything that's going on, have the latest and greatest so that you can bring that back to your businesses.
Awesome. So Tim, thanks for spending a few moments with us today. We know you're going to be there. We appreciate your support and look forward to continue down this path to help companies across the U.S. and globally to lower their emissions and decarbonize.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity, Ann.
You're welcome. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.